This video is for HI number 1 in case you were absent or in case you were in class and want to just rehear everything. So this is HI number 1, Google pre-search on 3 topics. We're going to start with 3 topics and then narrow it down because we're going to flush them out. We're going to see, do we actually have something to work with? Is this actually something I'm interested in? Maybe I thought I was. Maybe you find that there really isn't that much to go to it that you could write this HI about. Or maybe you find that there wasn't a connection to HOA and so you want to veer away from it. So we're going to take this from 3 topics down to 1. Our goal is to gain a basic understanding of each of the topics that we're looking at, that we would be able to talk about it. The big goal of this assignment is to create a master list of vocabulary. All these key terms that go with this event, specific people, specific events, specific documents. We want to be able to create this for 2 reasons. Number 1, it proves we have the knowledge and understanding, objective number 1 of IB history, about this topic. And number 2, it is going to help us when we get to academic research in HI assignment 3 by being able to have more words to plug into a search, opening up the breadth of sources that we can look at. We're going to narrow to that one topic that we will hopefully be dedicated to for our HI. We want to make sure we pick something and that is able to have a full HI about it, which is why we're doing this Google pre-search. And then we want to start finding more specific topics within your topic. Now, for example, what I mean is, let's say you're really interested in World War II. World War II, that's a big thing to tackle. And so you want to be able to narrow it down. Maybe a specific battle, a specific piece of technology, a person's impact. And so we want to be able to narrow it down because ultimately we only have 1,300 words for section 2 of our historical investigation. And to write about all of World War II in 1,300 words is impossible. And so it's way too complex and we're going to have to narrow it down, and that's what we're going to ultimately be able to find through these key terms. So for example, let's say you were someone who was really interested in the progressive era. Late 19th to early 20th century. Through this Google pre-search, you would start finding that there was a huge rise in working women. Okay, so maybe you're like, oh, this is even more interesting than I thought. Let's dig a little deeper. And maybe you find that there is something about leisure activities. And so now we can talk about leisure activities and how the progressive movement impacted women in the expansion of their leisure activities. You see how it's much more specific, still talking about what we initially set out to look at, but it's going to allow us to dive deeply into the specific topic and be able to stick to that 1,300 words. Eventually, big research tip that you would want to add to your interactive notebook under research tips and tricks is which we will eventually look at for HI assignment 3, is find an expert. The best way to learn about something is to find an expert's opinion, someone who has dedicated years and years of research, had many people look over it, and who have way more access to information than we do. And so this is an example for this specific example I have here about the leisure activities. This is an example going into an expert's research. You can look through this on your own time, see the breadth of research, the thesis, how it connects back to this time period and the progressive movement. And so this is the goal that we're going to get to by assignment 3. So what we did here is in class, everybody broke up and we practiced this Google pre-search. We're not going to be able to do that over this video, but Google pre-search is exactly what it sounds like. It's a Google search. It's not in an academic database. This is you just building your understanding. Now, does that mean we're just looking at any website? No. And back to our tips and tricks for research, what I would want you to have written down is for Google pre-search, you can start with something like Wikipedia. Very basic understanding, outlined pretty effectively, but then you want to be able to cross-reference and check with other sources. Things that are considered reliable and credible, like history.com. This is just going to be easier for us to build this basic understanding because it's less convoluted and complex than an academic source would be. And it's not going to be us analyzing these primary sources quite yet. We're just getting a very basic understanding to see if this is worth investing our time into for this historical investigation. So Now let's get to it. I'll kind of like give an overview of the example I gave. Um, there are 2 historical topics I'm interested in. And so for yours, you're going to need to come up with 3. I'm only going to do 2 for the sake of time, but you do need to flesh out 3 ideas. If you need inspiration, there's a list of HOA topics and the bullets that you can look through on the Google site. So that way it can maybe help you narrow down what you want to look at. So the 2 things that I'm super interested in are Henry VIII, which I've been like obsessed with learning about that since the 7th grade, and my teacher taught us about it. And then the Romanov dynasty that eventually fell at the beginning of the 20th century. And so these would be the 2 topics that I write in. And again, you would have a third. Then I'm going to go through and start my Google pre-search where I'm looking through on Google. Now, you don't just want to haphazardly take notes. You want to have organization to it. So that way you can start seeing the ideas and start piecing things together. A really effective way to do this like baseline research is using the WHAS that you set up in your interactive notebook. That would be who, what, where, when, historical significance. So you can see on HI number 1, I've already set that up for you. You need to have 5 for who, what, where, when, at least 5. Whoops. 3 for historical significance. And then also I've added connection to HOA to try to get us to find something that does connect. You don't want to force it, but we do want to keep that in mind since the big goal, ultimate goal of this class is to pass the exam, and we want to increase our breadth of knowledge on history of the Americas. So ultimately what we found in doing a Google pre-search together as a class about these 2 topics, Henry VIII and the Romanovs, I would narrow it down and ultimately pick the Romanovs. Now the reason that would be is because there are connections, as most things are connected in history, to the Americas in both of these topics. However, the part that connects Henry VIII to the Americas is not the part about Henry VIII's history that I'm interested in. And so like I wouldn't find it as interesting, and I wouldn't be motivated and intrigued to further research and to look into this and spend time on my HI. As opposed to the Romanovs, I can directly tie the Romanovs with the Americas because of how the Romanovs fell during World War I. And the United States was a part of World War I. And so there are connections, and that can be further explored, especially with the White Revolution that happens. And so this is going to be something A, that I'm interested in, and B, is connected to HOA. It might not be something I directly write about on my HOA, but through this research process, I will be gaining further knowledge on it. So that is essentially what you're doing with HI number 1. Fleshing through ideas. And just so you know, this is a separate page from the HI packet you will eventually get because it is about 3 topics, and I want the big bulk of that one topic you end up picking in the packet. And so this is kind of separate. If you have questions, please message me. Tutoring after school Wednesday. This is due Monday, August 26th. And after you flush through the ideas, step 3 is to ultimately pick which topic based on your interest and what you could really see yourself writing an HI about, and then also answering these reflection questions that will eventually help you with your Section 3 reflection of your historical investigation.